What has to be removed is ignorance. So if they're talking about Manonasa or Manonasha, depending how different people pronounce it differently, Manonasa means destruction of mind, extinction of mind. Remember in the teachings, as I share them, as traditionally as they're shared, if you're destroying something to attain liberation, there's only one thing that needs to be destroyed. It's ignorance. But there are lots of different names for this ignorance. And one of them is the mind. So that's talking about what you need to get rid of. But what you have to if you want to put it in more positive terms, then say realize the self. I want to know who I am. And don't worry about, if you're getting nightmares thinking about removal of the mind, don't worry about that for now. When it happens, you won't be worried. It's like being afraid of waking up from a dream. I'm not sure if you were there during the Satsang I once described. Imagine you're dreaming that you're this princess and you lived in a wonderful palace in the clouds and you're married to a wonderfully handsome husband and you're heirs to the throne of your kingdom and everybody loved you and all your friends and family. You might be very afraid of losing all this that you have. But when you wake up, you might be quite happy. You might think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I thought I was a princess and I was so happy with my dream husband and my dream palace in the clouds. And it was all in a total illusion. And I was so scared to let it go. But actually, there's nothing to be afraid of. So you're not the only person who has this kind of reaction to the teachings, by the way, Gordon. Many people have this kind of fear. And Ramana, people came to Ramana with this kind of fear as well. There's a verse in Guru Vachaka Kovai. I can't remember what verse number it is, but maybe someone can find it if you've got the PDF version. I can't remember the exact wording that's used either, but it's something along the lines of, essentially, there is no way self-inquiry will ever lead to madness. That's basically the gist. There's no way on earth that self-inquiry can ever lead to madness. And I think he gives some kind of Ramana gives some kind of analogy. I can't remember what it was, but it was something like I can't remember. He gives some analogy of something that would never happen, and then he says, thinking that self-inquiry can lead to madness is like thinking, and then he gives an analogy of something that would never happen. I think, if I remember correctly, because people are very afraid. And you're right, it's good to have this fear. It's good to be in touch with it. This fear is a part of the ego preservation mechanism. Remember, the mind, it doesn't want to end, we could say. So when it hears about its ending, its demise, it throws out all these thoughts and fears to keep you away from the true teaching, to keep you in a safe bubble, and then the ego can continue itself in peace. But of course, the ego's nature is not peace, it's suffering. The ego will keep you in your prison. You're in your prison cell. You're in your 2x2 meter prison cell. You've got your toilet, your basin, your bread, your water. And it's not a very great existence. But you're surviving, just about surviving in your 2x2 meter prison. This is our metaphor for ignorance now. And there's no windows, it's dark, it's musty, it's damp. But you're just about surviving. You've barely got enough space to lie down. You've barely got enough food to eat. But you're just about getting by. And right in front of you, there's a big glittering gold key. And right in front of you, there's a door with a gold lock on it. And all you've got to do is put the key into the lock, turn it, I open the door and you're out. But there's this voice in your head that says, oh, don't do that. There could be 101, 1,001 horrible things out there. Stay in here, you're safe. You're cozy and warm. Well, you're not that cozy. You're not that warm, but at least you're okay. Don't venture out. Don't venture into the unknown. Who knows what might lurk there? See? And if by chance, by fate, one day you're thrust outside the prison and you see the beauty of the sky and the landscape, you hear the birds and you see the sunlight, and it's like heaven on earth. And then you realize, oh my gosh, first time you realize there's so much more. There's something more in this life now. I just knew this prison. There's something else I didn't realize. I've now glimpsed it. I've seen there's something else out there. And then you become a spiritual seeker, maybe. Because you've had this glimpse of something different, something more. But then you find yourself back in your prison again, with the key sitting on your lap. And the fear of using that key. The excuses the mind comes up with. The 101 things you have to do that are very important inside the prison. So, oh, I can't open the door today. I've got to clean this corner of the prison cell. Oh, I can't open the door today because I've got to read a book on how to clean the other corner of the prison cell. Oh, I can't use the key to open the door today because I have to wash my hair. Oh, I can't use the key to open the door of the prison cell. I'm too tired now from washing my hair and cleaning the prison cell and reading the book on how to clean the prison cell. I'm too tired now. So and then behind all these excuses is maybe a fear. So this is one aspect of it. Another aspect is the terminology. Losing your mind is an English idiom. An idiom, a phrase in the English language. To lose your mind means to go crazy. He's off his rocker. He's gone crazy. He's lost it. She's out of her mind. She's lost touch with reality. He's gone nuts. All these phrases. Lost your mind. It's not really, when people go crazy, so to speak, they haven't lost their mind. It's the mind has got an intensely strong grip on them. So if you take what used to be called in psychiatry, now it's a very unfashionable term. It's not really used that much. But if you have a neurosis, which basically means anxiety disorders or depressive disorders, and some forms of disorder like post-traumatic stress and things like this, these are sort of neurotic type disorders. There'll be repetitive thought patterns and feelings that are associated with them, which keep on coming back. Your trauma, your anxieties, your worries, your frustration, your depression, low self-esteem. This is because the mind's got too tight a grip on you. You haven't lost your mind. The attachment to body-mind is too strong. And then again, in old-fashioned psychiatry, they don't use these terms again, and it's so much anymore. Well, actually, these terms are still used. You've got the neurosis and you've got psychosis. These are what would be, some people say these are the really crazy people. And again, this is very unpolitically correct, so I'm sorry about this. But psychosis is when the key cardinal feature of psychosis is, which includes things like bipolar affective disorder, what used to be called manic depression, and schizophrenia, and schizophrenic-like disorders, mental health issues. one of the cardinal features is something called a delusion. So, for example, in schizophrenia, one of the key features of schizophrenia is something called a delusion. And a delusion in psychiatry is defined as a fixed, false belief that is not in keeping with your cultural upbringing. So you might believe that you're the king of the world. You might believe that the television's talking to you. You might believe that everybody around you is out to get you, or a combination of all these things. You see, there are different types of delusion. And this is one of the cardinal features of schizophrenia. These are what some people say, oh, these people have lost it. They've lost their mind. They haven't lost their mind. Their mind's got too strong a grip on them. They have these fixed false beliefs. They're actually defense mechanisms and protective mechanisms in many cases. There are some rare cases where there's something else going on. But often it's when you go into the lives of these people, they've often had hugely traumatic lives. Or they've, their brain's been damaged in some way with drugs, psychedelics, or various types of substance misuse. And again, often people who really get into drugs and substance misuse, often then they have been abused and had a very difficult life prior to getting into that. Many people take these substances in order as a coping mechanism for the pain they're feeling. So even this is like the mind has got too much of a grasp. The mind is saying, oh, the television is talking to you. The mind is saying, you are Jesus, you are the Pope, you are the King of the world, or whatever delusion you have. The mind is saying these things to you, you see. So it's not really lost your mind. It's your mind is too caught up in these concepts and beliefs, etc., etc. Now, there are more complexities when you get into different aspects of mental health. So when we say lost your mind, it's just a turn of phrase. In Yoga Vashista, in fact, in Advaita Bodhidipika, which is that book you quoted, Gordon, they tell stories from Yoga Vashista. In Advaita Bodhidipika, it quotes from Vashista, what Vashista says. Yoga Vashista is one of the most important non-dual scriptures in the non-dual Vedanta tradition. It's probably the single largest scripture in the non-dual tradition. And most people think it was written at around the same time that Shankara was around, or prior to Shankara. Shankara, as many of you all know, is this kind of philosophical or spiritual giant in the world of non-duality, because he systematized much of the non-dual Vedanta teachings and repopularized and re-energized the teachings. And after Shankara came along, almost all the non-dual teachings refer to Shankara in some way, because he was such a big figure. But in Yoga Vashista, which is such a large, long text, there's not a single mention of Shankara in the entire text. So this leads people to believe it was written either at the same time as Shankara or prior to Shankara. But we have a wonderful wealth of teachings, and it's very beautifully done. Lots of imaginative stories, lots of myth and legend and fantasy and metaphor, if you like that kind of thing. I like that kind of thing. And there's the story of Yoga Vashista is quite unusual, because the person who is it's a conversation between a guru and a disciple, a teacher and a seeker. But the seeker is Lord Rama, God. Rama. Rama is the seeker. So he's a young man or a young boy in Yoga Vashista. So that he's been incarnated as Rama, but in this incarnation, he's still, for some reason, he's in illusion, he's in ignorance, even though he's Rama, God, like Rama and Krishna. These are two of the main deities in the Hindu pantheon. And he's talking to his teacher, who's a human being, Vashistha, sage Vashistha, who's teaching him. And there's a conversation that is actually quoted in Advaita Bodhidipika, where Rama is basically saying to Vashistha, but if I do this practice, aren't I going to become, he's basically expressing his fear. He's basically saying, aren't I just going to, I think this conversation is about Rama is worried about becoming silent and becoming still. And Rama says, if I just become silent and become still, aren't I just going to become like a stone? Or something like that. Aren't I just going to become like a rock? Yeah. Aren't I going to, and the implications are, aren't I just going to lose my humanity? Aren't I just going to be swept around by life and, be pushed around all over the place and maybe suffer as a result? You see? And Vashistha reassures him, says, no, you're going to, it sounds like that. It sounds like you're just going to lose your humanity. But that's not what happens. You actually become imbued and drenched in intelligence, in love, in intelligence, in purity. He uses different words. I can't remember the words. But that's, if you go beyond the words, that's a sense of what he's trying to say. I don't know if you read that part of Advaita Bodhidipika yet.
No, because that glossary is halfway down the first page, and that's as far as I've got.
Yeah.
And I started freaking out.
Manonasa means removal of ignorance. The mind is ignorance, the ego. And the mind, you don't freak out as the self. It's the mind starts freaking out. The mind starts freaking out. It's good before you go into the knowledge teachings, which remove the mind, which remove ignorance. If you have this fear, it's good to develop a very strong faith in God. And traditionally, this is the way it's done. Because when you have a very strong faith in God, when the freak out happens, and it does happen, and it probably will happen again, unfortunately, this is the way it goes for many of us. When the freak out happens, you can come back to that faith and that love of God and that trust and surrender. So if you can strengthen that aspect of yourself first, Gordon, that's going to, and I know, that I think that's a part of your journey anyway. But if you can strengthen that part of love and devotion to God, then I think that'd be really helpful to you.
Yeah, and maybe I am actually a bit too immersed in jnana at the moment. Not enough bhakti. Probably overdone the jnana. Probably not done enough bhakti to balance it out. Overdone it a bit.
I mean, it can be very scary for the mind to hear about its own demise. Because the mind thinks it's real and it's convinced you that it's you. And it feels it's necessary. But what you'll find is that when the mind isn't there, there is still like an appearance of mind, and the body functions just fine. But it's not really there. Basically, the message is don't worry. This is like the other metaphor Ramana gives us of the man hanging from the tree. Do you remember that one? You're hanging from the tree. You're petrified of letting go, and that's the condition we're in. But in Guru Vachakakova, again, I don't remember the verse exactly, but it's something along the lines of, when you let go of the branch of Maya or the branch of ignorance, you fall lovingly into the arms of the self, or something like that. I might have made the poetry up there. When you let go of the branch of ignorance, you're holding on to it for dear life. and you can feel it slipping and slipping, you're worried, you're getting scared, know that the firm ground of the self is beneath you and will catch you and keep you safe. So don't worry. Have faith. The mind is that which freaks out and gives you all the problems. Let go of the mind if you can. Go towards God. Go towards God, or go towards yourself. Surrender to God more and more. When you surrender to God, you're giving him your mind, which is ego suicide. So give God your mind more and more. Say, God, I can't do this. You do this. I don't want to take on all this burden. I don't know what I'm doing. You do it for me. Give it to God. And if the more you give things to God, the happier you'll be, the more faith. Trust it all, let it all, give it all to God. Trust God with everything. And let him take away your fear. What text was it? I can't remember what text it was. It might have. I can't remember. There's and this is, don't take offense to this, please. Yeah, ominous words, isn't it? But Ramana says there are two paths, paths, the path of self-inquiry, the path of self-surrender, right? Somewhere I've read, I can't remember where, he said, for the brave, there is the path of self-inquiry. And for those who are afraid, there is the path of self-surrender. So, again, when I said don't take offense, I meant it doesn't matter which of those two you're in. It's just a pragmatic teaching. For the brave, you can just go towards the self. You plunge in. Some people are afraid, and you have to surrender to God. You need a mother or a father to catch you, to cradle you, to look after you. You need a God, the ultimate parent, to reassure you, to have faith in. Has anyone come across that before? The brave and the fearful, or something like that, in Ramana's works? Where did I read that? If anyone finds out, please let me know. I'm not sure. So a lot of these terms in the English language, like losing your mind, they're misnomers. They're not strictly speaking correct. Another example that came to mind was the term brainwashing. There's a term brainwashing, which is basically when you indoctrinate people with a fixed ideology, especially if it's a dangerous ideology. You say, oh, that person's been brainwashed. That means they believe something, hook, line, and sinker. And it's often something that's not very helpful to them. But what we're doing, brainwashing literally means cleaning out the brain. Or you could say purifying the brain, purifying the mind. Now, taken at face value, that's what we want to do. We want to clean out the mind. We want to purify the mind. But that's not what brainwashing means. Brainwashing is actually putting something into the mind that is conceptual, that is ideological, which is the opposite of what we're talking about. So again, these phrases like losing your mind is not actually losing your mind, it's actually strengthening the mind. These mental illnesses, they're strengthening the mind. They're based on mind. They don't occur the mind if the thinking isn't there, or the mind isn't there, for the most part. And same with brainwashing. Brainwashing is not purifying the mind. It's not cleaning out the mind. It's putting dirt into the mind. It shouldn't be called brainwashing. I don't know what we can call it. So this is another example of how the language isn't accurate. The language, the word brainwashing or losing your mind, doesn't accurately describe what's actually happening. So when you see somebody, you think they've lost their mind. They haven't lost their mind. Their mind is telling them, is giving them wrong information. So it's a rather long answer. But there are just different aspects of that question which I wanted to explore, and hopefully that's interesting for the whole group as well.